My name's Marcia Albu. I'm the Chief Executive of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and we've commissioned some work on the future of work, and I'm delighted to have here Stephen, who's led the work on this topic, and he's going to talk a little bit about it. Stephen, welcome. Do you want to just introduce yourself and your organisation?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm Stephen Evans. I'm the Chief Executive of the Learning and Work Institute. We're an independent policy, research and development organisation that looks at employment, lifelong learning and skills.
The labour market has been changing for a while. I think we all know how that's manifested, but just tell us a little bit about the key trends that you've been seeing.
Well, I think there's some really big seismic shifts going on. So we have an ageing population, longer working lives. And then we also have shifts in technology, changing the types of jobs available out there as well, changing the sectors that people are working in. Those are long-term trends. We've then also got some policy shifts, so things like the transition to net zero as part of mitigating climate change. That's going to change the types of jobs available and the skills required. And then we've had the pandemic, of course, as well, which has led to some acceleration in some of those trends and some new trends as well. So much more flexible and remote working, for example, more shopping online. All of those things are changing the skills needed, the jobs available, and therefore the skills that people need, how they might get into work, how often they need to change careers. These are really big changes going on that will continue for decades to come.
So we've got demographic changes, economic changes, technological changes. This is a lot happening in a short space of time, and you mentioned COVID as well. So who are these trends impacting on most?
Well, this was the really important question that this research was trying to look at, really, is you've got those big trends. Which groups are most affected? Which parts of the country are most affected? And what you see is that many of those trends are affecting people with protected characteristics more than the general population. So, for example, you see bigger growth in 0 hours contracts amongst young people and amongst disabled people. You see people from ethnic minorities more likely to work in sectors that are at risk of automation as well. So the trends might be commonly seen across the economy, but they're affecting different groups more than others.
Let's just explore some of those maybe in a little bit more detail. So young people, for example, what are the experiences of young people?
So young people, for example, saw a bigger increase in unemployment through the pandemic. You often see recessions hitting young people's employment prospects harder, and it's really important that we get them back to work as quickly as possible, because a period out of work when young can have permanent and long-term scarring effects on pay and job prospects. But also, we've seen bigger growth in use of the gig economy amongst younger people as well. And one of the questions really is, well, to what extent is that a choice for young people, and perhaps they're doing it alongside other work or studies, or to what extent is that's what they can find, that's what's available, and they're struggling to then get onto the thing that they want to do thereafter. So young people particularly more likely to be in those flexible forms of work, particularly more likely to be hit in terms of their employment prospects through the pandemic.
What about the other end of the age spectrum for older people?
So with older people, we've seen over the last couple of years a real reduction in the number of older people in the workforce. So in the decade up to the pandemic, we saw big growth in employment for older people, so people particularly over the age of 50. That was the fastest group for employment growth, but a real reduction since then, partly due to ill health, partly due to work not being available that matches their skill set or is available on a flexible basis. So you kind of see some of those sorts of trends through the pandemic. But again, a real sort of difference between and within groups, really, I think, about experience of flexible work or insecure work or things like the gig economy. So there isn't really a uniform picture, and for some people it's a good thing, it's their choice, they've got the resources to make those choices. For others, it's probably more of a forced choice due to lack of alternatives.
And lots of other groups we could talk about, but let me just ask about one more, about disabled people.
Yes, so disabled people have a much lower employment rate than non-disabled people. That's been true for many decades, and there's a stubbornly large gap that we need to look to do something about. But then also what we've seen is for those disabled people who are in work, there's been faster growth in the number of disabled people in the gig economy and in self-employment and other forms of flexible work as well. So one of the questions for policymakers, I think, is to what extent is that a good thing because it's giving disabled people more routes into different types of work that may suit them better? Or to what extent are they being forced into it because they're struggling to get into other forms of work?
Right. Well, as you know, the Equality and Human Rights Commission is here to ensure fairness for everybody in the workplace, and these kinds of gaps in employment rates between disabled people, non-disabled people and other groups is the kind of thing that we absolutely want to address and make sure that employers are treating their staff fairly, both in the recruitment process but also obviously when people are employed. So on the basis of your research, what more should be done to understand the nature of these trends and what we can do about them?
I think the UK labour market is characterised by lots of flexibility and lots of different forms of working, and that's a really good thing because it gives people a better chance to find work that suits them and so suits their personal circumstances. But the real question, I think, in a lot of these issues is to what extent is this flexible employment that works for both the employer and the employee, and to what extent is it one-way flexibility in favour of the employer and actually this isn't working for the employee. So I think understanding a lot more about to what extent are people choosing these forms of work and it's their choice and it works for them, or to what extent are they being forced into it, they're not getting other opportunities, and can we do more to open up those opportunities? And of course it will vary. For some people, this is the thing that works for them. They might want a 0 hours contract, they may want flexible working. For others, it may be a dead end for them, struggling to get onto the thing that they really want to do.
And so these changes, these big changes that we've witnessed over the last decade or two, in terms of technology and demographics and the economy, do you think it's shifted the balance from the employee to the employer or vice versa? What's your sense? These
changes are not going away. There will be new changes come along. Not many people predicted the pandemic coming along, for example. So there's always unpredictable change. But these big shifts aren't going away. And the question is, how do we empower people to make active choices and make sure they know what their rights are and they're able to enforce them, and also support employers, because most employers want to do the right thing. They want the widest access to a talent pool they can get, but they don't always know how to do that. So how can we better support employers too? Excellent. Okay, well, on our website, equalityhumanrights.com, we do have information for employers about the labour market and about what they need to be putting in place for their employees. And we've also got information about the rights of employees as well. So I hope very much that people will have a look at our website and make sure that that's the case. And obviously that you and other organisations do more research on this important topic so that we understand how the labour market is changing, and so we can make sure that it remains fair even though all kinds of factors change around us. Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with the EHRC on this really, really important topic. Thank you.